Hello, welcome to the Minimalist EDC. My name's Chris, and today is a fun one. I was actually sent this knife to check out. I requested to have a little bit of time with it and to check out a knife that's a little bit more expensive than the knives that I currently am interested in and collect. And I guess a friend of the channel, Kevin over at Knife Nerdery, was kind enough to lend me the knife for a little while, and so I could check it out. And I'd kind of like to do a opening first impressions for you guys and show you why this thing sparked my interest. If you're not already a subscriber over at Kevin's channel, please go check out Knife Nerdery. Link will be in the description below. He has great long form content on the intricate and minute details that really make this hobby fun and really are fun to get into with some of these knives and the things that creators are doing these days. So definitely go give him a follow. So you may have seen on my video on the TRM Shadow, he sent that over because I asked for it. He was very kind, and I sent him a few knives that I had to check out, and he sent this back to me to take a look at. So this is going to be the Holt Blade Works Haptic. And so I reached out, like I said, and said, hey, this looks really interesting. These things are crazy expensive. They're, anywhere between 700 and, I've seen them as high as like $1,500 for some of their models. And he was kind enough to let me have a few weeks with it. So let's open it up and take a look. Oh man, that action. Don't know what to say off the top of my head. Like, I'm not a huge fan of flippers, and you'll probably hear me say that a few times through the video. Like, flippers are what got me into the hobby, but I am the knives I pick up these days typically don't have them, but wow, they are doing that right. The crisp detent, it just flies out and has that wonderful, that wonderful little ting at the end. It's quick, it's snappy, and that fall shut action, that's lovely. So let's get some size comparison out of the way real quick. You've got your American $2 bill. This is the Holt Haptic, and some things that are not even close to this in price range, but are more standard candles of the industry. You have your Civivi Elementum, Para 3. I think I have a bug out somewhere around here. Yeah, there's my bug out. The Benchmade bug out. And so you kind of see, it's in that, it's a little bit bigger than all these. And there's another knife that I think draws very close comparisons to this one that we'll talk about in a minute, but it is in that EDC range, right? It's not a massive knife. It's not, crazy large. And it's not crazy heavy either. Like, it's all titanium, except for, of course, the blade and the liner. So let's talk a little bit about why I thought this was a really cool knife. So first thing is what Holt Blade Works does with their scales. They have this very intricate milling pattern on the outside. It's not sharp. It's not terribly abrasive, but it's grippy and it just feels good, right? It's just amazing. And on the back side, we have continuation of that pattern, and then the milled clip is also got a pattern. It's kind of interesting. So you have, I understand this is intentional. You can see that the mill pattern goes from the base or the scale and continues almost seamlessly onto the clip, but for some reason they decided to go with a clashing line pattern for most of the clip, except for right here. I don't know what I think about that. I think it would have been cool if the whole thing had been one continuation. This does make the clip stand out a bit. I don't know. I may have to see what they look like side by side, but I think I would prefer it if the whole thing was a continuation of the pattern that's on the scale itself. And so, talking about the body of the knife as well, you have pivots that are very detailed. Now, let me zoom back in again. So these little tri-way, tri-way pivot system is a Hinder thing, but like I say tri-way because you got this kind of like triangle looking thing. It's all intricately milled. It looks good. It's symmetrical. We got it on both sides. That looks fantastic. The flipper has very functional jimping, just like 3 or 4 really good jimps, and they're grippy, so you're not going to fall off of that like some other knives that have shallow jimps or no jimping at all. We're looking at the blade steel, which you're going to have your S90V, good blade steel. And just little touches like this, like the chevron patterns on the back spacer. The chevrons really don't go with the rest of the flowy line nature of what's going on here. They're more sharp and angular, but they kind of work. Like it's just a point of interest on the knife, and that's one thing I really like about attention to detail like this. You have a kind of a boring space back here if you don't do anything, and maybe they didn't want to just put some wavy stuff, but they put little chevrons in there, and that looks good as anything else, I suppose. And it's let me put it in the hand. No, I'm not getting any grip out of it. Like, I'm not being able to push this against my palm and get any grip out of it. So I don't think there's any functional nature to what we're dealing with right there, but they look nice. As far as further aesthetics of the knife, there's not a whole lot of hardware accents on this thing. So you have the 2 screws on the front. They line up to 2 screws on the back. I would aesthetically prefer if there were no screws on the front, if the whole thing could be done through the back. I understand, that there is functional considerations that need to be made when making a knife like this. You want it to hold together, but this is essentially held together by 3 screws, 1 in the pivot, 2 here, and these, I assume these connect through barrel spacers of some sort in the back or through the back spacer itself. Interestingly enough, one thing that they did is hide the screw for the pocket clip. So I believe if I open this guy up, we can take a look inside. I'm going to try to get a focus on that. Let's see, where's my... I think I have a light here. I apologize for the focus. Yeah, you see that there's a screw right back here near the back, and that is going to secure your pocket clip. So you're going to have to take the knife apart to get that pocket clip off. Also, while we're in here, we see the screw right here. That actually holds the liner lock in place. So a lot of times the liner lock will be part and parcel of the frame somehow, but it looks like what they've done is milled out a space for it and then added this little piece of steel with, you see the bend in it right here that allows for it to have that deformation where it's actually going to close. And we'll look on the other side. There's a little bit of milling you can see near the back, but it's not crazy milled out, which is fine. It's a pretty light knife to begin with, right? Continue to look through this guy. The actual liner lock itself, it has that little chamfered edge right here, which allows you to have some grip on it, which is nice. And yeah, interesting. I'm gonna see if the camera picks this up. Can you see how on the liner lock itself, it looks like that they've actually milled out a similar pattern to what's going on the scale. So even though that this lip of the liner lock sticks out, proud of the base or the scale itself, it continues that pattern. That's just one of those little attentions to details that you just don't see in other knives. I think it's quite wonderful myself. So, as I alluded to before, I think this knife is very similar to another one in my collection, and I'm interested in this one for the same reasons I picked up the other one. So let's take a look at them together. So this knife right here, and see if you can guess what it is already. It's going to be the Pena Bravo. All right. So looking at them, pivot to pivot, we're looking at a very similar knife. You have an almost identical ratio of the handle here, the handle space. This has a much more recessed prescriptive grip for where your index finger goes, where this has a more shallower area on the scale. I actually prefer this design where it doesn't tell me where I have to put my finger. But so far, I haven't played around a lot with the grip yet. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I just putting it in my hand already, it didn't feel bad. Didn't feel any hot spots just on the initial grip, but we'll talk about that more in a moment. The blade itself, we have a very, very similar blade shape, right? We have this like sheep's foot. We have the swedge. They come down at an almost similar angle. Like if you were to put these two knives on top of each other, you almost get an eclipse, right? They're very, very similar. As far as their profile here, a lot of similar things going on. So you end up with the blade stock. This one actually, the Holt, the jimping is in a functional place. Right here, this is non-functional jimping. You can't use it. It dips behind the scale. If you watch my other video, I talk about that a little bit. This jimping is actually where your thumb goes, which is great. You have a back spacer with some jimping, mainly for accenting. Same with this one, right? On the obverse side, more of the same. This is a aftermarket clip. If you watch the video on this one, you will see why. But I prefer this one to the stock clip. But yeah, these things are exceptionally similar. But where do they differ, right? So we have a liner lock on both of them. They're just implemented in a slightly different way. Whereas we talked about this one earlier on the Holt, we have a inset liner lock that is milled into the scale, whereas on the Bravo, the liner lock is essentially the liner. It's much more traditional of how this is done. But you have a similar concept. You have the cutout right here for the way it leans in and actually locks up. The mechanics are the same, just the execution is a little bit different. And this is titanium, this is steel liners, just a little bit different. There's no, in my opinion, no benefit to one or the other. I think they're both well done. Where the Holt is doing something that I really appreciate that the Pena did not is the grind. So if we're looking at the grind on this guy, it is a hollow grind, which makes for an amazing slicing experience, in my opinion, for an EDC knife. The thicker grind on the Pena, I mean, it's a beast knife. It's going to do work. It's going to cut. But if you really want a knife that is going to just slice through light duty packages and things that we all use our knives for, the hollow grind is my preference. Staying on the blade, another preference that I have that this one really shines at is the stonewash, whereas the Pena is a belt satin. And this is a personal preference. I prefer a stonewash on my blades because I use them. I don't have any knife that just sits around. Some get more use than others. I mean, there's some knives in my collection that I haven't carried in a year. Doesn't mean I won't. It's just they're not my favorite things to put in my pocket, and they probably need to get on the chopping block to get sold. But that being what it is, a stonewash finish, in my opinion, is a working finish. It hides scuffs, it hides scratches. It continues to look good after time, whereas in my personal opinion, the belt satin, the hand satin blades show those scratches a lot more because, like with this one, you have a lot of these parallel lines on the blade, and as you get like a line that goes this way and a line that goes that way from just random cuts, it just kind of, it's an aesthetically displeasing thing for me. That's the best way I can put it. So, yeah, that's another thing that draws me to this knife. And I believe you can get these in belt satin and hand satin and other finishes as well. But I really like the way that they've executed here on the stonewash. And it's not a deep stonewash, but it is nice. So aesthetically, the plain tie, the stonewash, the sheep's foot, the hollow grind, like there's just a lot going on with this one that is just right. And so I think we're done talking about the Bravo. So, yeah. So would I be picking one of these up? And the answer is just a solid maybe. Like I said, I don't prefer the flipper tabs. Just it does not spark joy, as they say, to have to open a knife with only a flipper tab. Going back to this one just for a second, like having the thumb stud and the top flipper, that is much more my speed. So like if this thing was a thumb stud or had that a little bit of an extension for a top flip or a thumb flip, all day, every day, I would be signing up for the lotteries for getting these. Speaking of which, if you don't already know, these are not easy to get. You can get them on the secondary, of course, but you will be paying the gold price. To get these from the company themselves, it's a little weird. Like you have to be part of a Facebook group, and they do lotteries and things. Best I can tell from their website, I don't think they sell them from their website any longer. Their website seems to be outdated. But if you are looking for one of these, I would definitely suggest going to the Holt Blade Works Facebook group, just paying attention to the mods and the owners and seeing what they're doing. But yeah, this one, there's a few other knives that I want in this price point that I think are much more my style that I would be going for before picking up one of these. But I wouldn't hate being an owner of one for sure. Like the working finish, the solid nature of this thing, it just feels good in the hand. Speaking of which, let's talk about that. The feeling good in the hand. It does fit my hand. Like I don't feel any hot spots, and I don't, from my size hand, large size gloves, putting my index finger right here, it doesn't. It definitely is a prescriptive grip, right? Like you're going to feel like you have to put your index finger right here because it just accepts it. Like you there's no other way around it. And the flipper tab forms the top of this ring, essentially, where your index finger is going to go. And so, yeah, you can get a really good 4-finger grip on this. Like I said before, the jimping right here is actual functional jimping. Your thumb, that's where your thumb goes. It's where it's supposed to be jimped. So I would have no issue like doing really hard push cuts, like getting through thick cardboard. I would have no issue with going into a grip like this where you're using the tip for fine work or draw cuts. Something like this, like I usually call this like cutting the apple grip, like curling your fingers around and like pulling it forward. There's a few hot spots when doing that. Like I wouldn't be the most comfortable thing to do all day, but like I said, if I'm just cutting an apple, not a problem. But yeah, this thing is neat. It is a pleasure to get to see it, to experience it, to see all the intricacies of it. Like one thing you just don't understand until you put your hands on one of these things and see how well it's made, the tolerances they do. Like I don't know. It's a nitpicky thing, but I love it. So let's just talk about it real quick. The detent ball ramp thingy they have in here. When I first closed it, I didn't even know if I was going to talk about this thing because it's not integrally important to how the knife works, but just to embrace my my inner Kevin here and nerd out on it for a second. That little nub right there is at the top of the liner lock, and so if you've ever had a pocket knife where you've started to close it and it kind of sits in this position and then clicks back out, you can't do that here. The second you get it over the liner lock, it's over that little ramp, and then it's ready to close. Like it's coming down. So there's none of that detent rock where you're on the top of the liner but you haven't hit the ball yet. Like I hate that. I wish more manufacturers would go with something like this or put their detent ball higher on the liner lock. And so when I see something like this and the way it's implemented, the way it's executed, it's just so refreshing to see it done right. And there's a lot done right with this. I haven't seen one thing done wrong. The only thing that I see on this knife that I dislike is slight aesthetics and mechanics that are personal to me, not anything wrong with the knife itself. So when you're paying $700-800 for a knife, you deserve to get something of this quality. And with Holt, it appears that you do. So if you've enjoyed this, I may put together another video after I've had this in my possession for a week or two to give you some final thoughts. But I really appreciate a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being part of this community. Y'all have a great day.